Hi everyone, today was this the 8th of October, or maybe the 7th of October, considering what part of the planet you're on. The Nikon's brought out a new camera, well not a new camera, but it's the Nikon D610. This is not a cheap camera. This is a very, very expensive camera, around about $2,000, which when it comes into the UK, that'll be about £2,000 as well, so not a cheap one. What it is it's an update to its entry-level full-frame camera, the Nikon D610. Now, this wasn't technically an upgrade or an update to the D700. That still hasn't really come out, but effectively Nikon brought out two new cameras, the D800 and the D600. The D800 was 34 megapixels, or 36 megapixels. The D600 was a 24 megapixel camera. So both of them very high megapixel, and both full frame. Lots of new kind of sensor. Features, because it's got compared to the D700, which is the camera which I use, it seemingly has got better high ISO. Still to see that actual on screen, especially when you zoom in 1:1. It's also got video features as well now. But whenever the D600 came out, people were going tits about the amount of photos that they were taking, which were having dots all over them. Everyone's like, what is going on? Why are my images looking like they've got dust spots on them? And I found out that it wasn't dust spots, it was oil spots. And a lot of people are going, where the chuff is this oil coming from? And seemingly the shutter mechanism in it was squirting out oil. And we're talking about tiny, minute, atomic size amounts of oil. It's effectively just the lubricant that was used to keep the shutter nice and fast. The other thing which everyone kind of humphed about was that the shutter only went up to 1/4000th of a second instead of 8,000ths of a second, but generally that's not much of an issue to most photographers that'll be buying this camera. They'll probably never see the difference in that kind of area of shutter speed. Anyway, so what they say it was a shutter, but it might have been the mirror mechanism. One of them was causing issues to go onto the actual sensor, which were coming up in people's photos, especially if they use a small aperture like f/16 or something like that. Then you see the dots on their images. So everyone complained about that. Nikon never admitted to it. They said, no problem here, no problem here. Suspect it was probably a manufacturing issue somewhere whenever they're building it. That there's just, it must mean like a millimeter something wrong. Not even a millimeter would be too big. It'd be like a micrometer amount of something wrong, which meant something got to squirt out at some angle that would hit the sensor. So anyway, Nikon have finally brought out an upgrade. I don't know why they really needed to do an upgrade. They could have easily just said, or just built it in, but I suppose if they say, hey, we've got a new camera here, it means they get to sell some more stuff. So it's the Nikon D610. It's exactly the same camera. There's almost nothing different with it. What they have done is they've slightly changed, what they're saying is that they slightly changed the shutter. So now instead of a 5.5 frames, or 5.5 frames a second shutter speed, so if you're going like that, it is now up to 6. Again, I don't think anybody's really going to notice that difference there. I go, oh wow, I've got to get that instead. And it's, ISO is all the same, video is all the same, and its white balance, seemingly it's saying its white balance has been improved. Again, I've never really seen a problem with the white balance, and again, I shoot RAW all the time, so I kind of control the white balance in post when I've got a bigger screen for me to really view it. So I've never known people to really complain about the white balance. That may be in a video function, maybe there's a alternating white balance in the video, but again, that's not complaints which I saw. It's all about the oil. So effectively, they've brought out the new one. Now, what to say? I'm not bashing this camera in any way. I think its files that it gives out will be fantastic. They'll be just as good as the D600 on. So, well, there's going to be no difference in the files. That's the main thing. So it generally, if you know somebody who's selling a D600, just kind of go, cool, can I get that for cheap? Because you'll be able to get it for cheap. Again, if somebody's selling a D700, which is what I've got, I would say you're probably getting that. You're like, oh yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's not really. It's what I think is it's a weird market. The fact that this is it's the entry level full frame camera, but yet it's so many professional things on it. For example, it's 6 frames a second, it's 24 megapixels, it's super high dynamic range, it's super high ISO abilities, and it's just I don't know. It just seems to be, it gives so much more, but it's not like. I would understand if they made a full frame camera, because people just go, I want full frame, but they made one which only had like 3 frames a second, maybe not as great in ISO, and maybe only 16 megapixels. I would totally understand that, but if it was a lot cheaper. But instead, this is still a goddamn expensive camera. I'm not expecting students to go, oh, I need a full frame, I need to spend $2,000 on it. So that's the only kind of weird kind of thing. I just think, why would you get something which is so expensive and it would still be, like they say, it's the intro camera or the entry level for their full frame? It's just a bit bizarre marketing thing. I think there was definitely a market lower down, cheaper as well, with not quite so high megapixels and not so many features as well. But that's just my thinking. That has nothing to do with it. So, but if you are in the area of selling, maybe you're selling a couple of cameras and you're thinking, right, I want to upgrade, I want to get a full frame, I would say this is absolutely. But what I would say is go and have a feel of it. Now, whenever I felt this camera, the one thing I felt about it is, in comparison to the camera which I've got just now, the D700, it felt light and small, which isn't a bad thing. It's just if you're used to a chunky camera, for example, if you've got a Canon 5D or 5D Mark II or 3 or whatever, they feel like a good brick in your hand, which in a lot of cases is a good thing. Having a small thing in your hand isn't necessarily, you know, mobile phones getting smaller and smaller to a point they get so small you're having a needle to actually press the buttons on the thing is not actually helping. With this, if you're used to a bigger camera, if you've got a chunkier camera, this may be a little bit like, oh, it's a little bit light, throw it around, it feels cheap, it feels light. So I would say one of the most important things about a camera is how it feels in your hand, not just how well you're able to take photos, but I would say as long as it's comfortable in your hand, certainly if you've got smaller hands or if you've had smaller cameras in the past, this is a great thing to go into. If you've had bigger cameras, like even if I had the Canon, what was it, the 40D? It's an older, or 30D or 20D, something like that. I remember picking that up and going, oh wow, this is like a big Canon 5D Mark II. They're like, no, it's a 40D. And I'm like, oh my god, this was massive. But this is quite small. So that's the only thing to have a little note of. So definitely play with it, feel it, touch it in the shop before you definitely go out and buy it. Don't just see it on the internet and go, oh, I'll buy it. Definitely have a little play with it before you do, and get used to the menu settings as well. But yeah, $2,000 for a body on its own is not really for beginners, and really this is who would buy this? I still don't know who would buy this. If you've already got a full frame camera like the Nikon D3 or the Nikon D700 or anything like that, you wouldn't go to this. I don't know anybody who's done that. I know people that go to the D800, fair dues, but this just seems a bit kind of nowhere. But let me know what you think. Cheers guys, bye bye.